be aware if you're a fan. If not, you should get into this because it is exceptional. Svensk Rök, it translates as directly Swedish smoke. Swedish smoke. Svensk, Swedish, that's pretty clear. Rök, the word rök means smoke. It's related to an English word, reek. In Middle English, reek meant smoke. There's a lovely phrase in Scotland, lang may ye lumreek, wishing people prosperity. So the words are interlinked. But what makes our Svensk Rök a little bit different is how we do things. We make a whiskey which is, we hope, reflective of the heritage and the location where we come from. And we bring as many Swedish flavours into the whiskey as possible. We dry our barley using not only local peat, locally cooked peat, but also a little bit of something special from the forest, that's juniper. So our Swedish smoke is something which we've been doing, well, we've been smoking barley at Mackmyra since before we started distilling, which seems logical, but of course, we were the first people to make single malt whiskey in Sweden, and we were the first people to make peated single malt whiskey. In the very early days, the founders were malting barley in their back garden, believe it or not. They were taking green malt and they were putting it into a homemade mini pagoda. And this little pagoda was where they had their early experiments. Originally in the back garden of one of the founders, but when the neighbours started complaining, they had to move it down to the seaside, where it was going to disturb people a little bit less. I would have loved it. I mean, the sense that we get when we drive by are sensational. But unfortunately, not everyone agreed at that time. And we've been making smoky barley and smoky spirit for quite some time. But it wasn't until 2013 that Svensk Rök, as a bottled expression, as a permanent member of our core range, was available. Prior to that, we had done releases in our Preludium and Previs series. These were the two very limited runs we did, special editions at the very beginning of the company. We've always offered, as part of our private cask program, Rökig as an option as you choose your spirit to select when you select your own cask, and even extra Rök. Carl will tell a little bit more about that later. But Svensk Rök, as we know it today, well, it's gone through different iterations. It is always developing, and the latest batch is absolutely sensational. We're going to take you through it in a moment. But Carl, can you take us through how we make our smoky whiskey nowadays, please?
Yeah. So we are one of the few distilleries that smoke and malt our own barley, one of the few distilleries across the world. And as you mentioned about sort of our founders visiting distilleries back in the day, I guess late 90s, I think it was, went over to Ireland and learned a bit more sort of about local sourcing and, using the local peat, local ingredients. And that was one of the key kind of specs, I guess, of making Svensk Rök, was keeping it as local as possible. So one of the key things for us, I think we lost lost our buddy there. So one of the key things for us was using Swedish grown barley and also local peat. Our local peat comes from a place called, forgive my Swedish, Körenmossen.
I think that's good.
Thank you. Any Swedish people in the chat as well, please let me know I did.
We should all preface our tastings with that apology, really, and have it running along the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, may contain dodgy Swedish. So the peat itself comes from a place called Körenmossen, which translates to Karen Bog. Karen is a quite a common Swedish name, and bog is literally bog. So that gets transported back to the distillery in Gävle, and it's all done, like I say, next to the distillery itself. Our smoker itself is actually made, and I really, really like this, it's from a repurposed shipping container, which I think is just a fantastic use of a utilitarian industrial piece of material. So a really clever use of it. So if you can just about see in the image we've got down below there, go on.
This image is actually from the early days. This is prior to the container being converted. This is after the homemade pagoda.
Yeah.
But this is in the back of a lorry, which was converted to be a kiln.
Okay, nice. There we go.
And here we go. This is the container.
Yeah. So this is our shipping container, and our barley will be fed in through the roof and hand raked across the floor, and the whole process of our smoking for making our smoky liquid takes around 36 hours. And every 4 hours or so is when we need to kind of re-top up with more peat and juniper, which is our little twist, our Swedish twist to it. The juniper gets added when the peat is sort of glowing, once it's warm. So you get the peat going nice and warm first, and then when it's glowing, that's when you get the juniper twigs on. Why juniper? So it's local. It's very high oil content wood, so it gives you a lovely dense smoke, almost like kind of balsamic slight taste with sort of fresh notes at the end. And I genuinely think that comes through in the final liquid. Again, consciously from an environmental point of view, the actual juniper twigs come from the local power companies. Essentially, when they're trimming back the lines, they have to prune back the juniper trees. So rather than just burning the twigs anyway, well, all right, we'll have them. We'll use them to make our liquid to give it a bit more character. So I just think that's an absolutely great way of getting use out of what essentially would be a waste product. Mm-hmm. So the whole process of us smoking and malting the barley takes around 2 weeks in total. The end result, for anyone, I guess, who out there is sort of really into smoky whiskey and really into sort of the numbers side of things, our malted barley then comes out around 60 ppm, phenol parts per million. That's not to say it's a direct translation into our liquid itself. The actual composition of Svensk Rök, which we're going to drink shortly, and I'm sure you're gagging to all get into it, is it's around a third of our smoky liquid goes into that. And then the other 2/3 is unsmoked. And that gives us a nice chance to still bring about those sort of dense smoky notes, but also give it a nice balance. And that's one of the key things we're going for, is balance. So in terms of what the actual number is for phenol parts per million, we don't really know. And we're okay with that because it's about taste rather than focusing too much on a number. Having a great smoky balanced whiskey with sweet elements and fruit elements in there as well. We also do an extra Rök, which is essentially 2/3 smoke and a third unsmoked liquid. As of right now, we don't do a 100% smoked whiskey. Who knows down the pipeline? We'll see. But yeah, so for us, it's all about sort of lovely, balanced, full taste. So hopefully that was sort of it in a nutshell, really, about how we smoke and how we get that kind of smoky flavor in there. Yeah, sorry, Alex, is there anything else you want to?
Yeah, I think that's something you touched on there. I think when people talk about ppms, it's very helpful as a guide sometimes to help explain some of this and to people who may be just getting into whiskey. But what we know is that there is far, far more to how a whiskey ends up with these certain flavors. So depending on the not just the barley you've sourced, but how you distill it and how you cask it, how it's casked, all result in different levels of smokiness. Mickey, casks is something that you're going to tell us about, isn't it?
Yeah, so obviously we produce a really good distillate, and there's no point in producing a really good distillate if you don't look after it properly through the maturation process. So we use American oak, we use Swedish oak, we use ex-bourbon casks, and we also use casks that have been soaked in Oloroso as well. The sizes of the casks range anywhere from 30 litres up to 128 litres. So there's a lot of wood contact there within those casks. And we put them together as Angela sees fit to get the final flavour profile, really. And so we'll touch on what some of those casks actually give us and what Angela's written and the team at Mackmyra have written. So on the nose, only slightly smoky and a bit spicy. Pick up a bit of the peat coming through there as well. Some of the juniper for sure. See, obviously, you know, the juniper comes from the twigs, as Carl touched on, and then we enter into some of more familiar tasting notes that you'll find in whiskey coming from the cask. So vanilla coming from the American oak, caramel, citrus, pears. So you get a lot of those sort of notes from the American oak and from the Swedish oak as well. And then we get into raisins and the spicy oak coming from some of the Oloroso. And notes of toasted bread and anise. So the anise with that spice there, that's definitely coming straight through from the Swedish oak, I reckon. So, and then on the taste, a bit smokier than it is on the nose. We get the peat coming through, obviously, in the juniper notes as well, quite heavily then. It's a bit dry and oaky, like tobacco leaves and herbs. A slight saltiness coming through on the back there. With minerals, anise, and green fruits. So again, some familiar tasting notes there that you'd associate with some Scotch whiskies, maybe. And then on the finish, only slightly dry. The smoke carries through a little bit. Definitely get the oak. The salt stays around for a little bit, I find, in the finish there, and picking up some of the herbs as well. So I mean, that's the official tasting notes that you can read on the back of the box, on the website, etc. But obviously, people don't always get what other people get either. And for me personally, I'm not a great one for tasting notes, etc. and be able to pick up certain things. Sometimes I'm a little bit easily led. If someone was to mention something, I wouldn't say I would always agree with them, but I could maybe see a point in where they're coming from. But other times I'm like, "You getting that?" I not even remotely. So, Alex, what's your personal take on the tasting notes?
Well, I think overall, the first question has to be: is it delicious?
Yeah,
for sure.
And I think in this case, it is absolutely sensational.
Yeah.
This is an absolutely intriguing whiskey. It's whiskey. It's all about dimension for me. There are so many areas you can explore. There's the herbal notes, the fruity notes, the earthy notes. There's huge big bonfires. There's incredible sort of smoked fruits, which is a really interesting term to use, but it's fruit and smoke all together. The herbal note, that a little bit of a jellied fruit thing happening there too. I've always had things like citrus. Lemon bonbons, particularly. Anything what lemon bonbon is, it's a type of sweet you don't see so much anymore, like a little dusty, lemony coating. You can get strawberry versions as well, but this is lemon bonbons, dried raspberries and cranberries as well, like a delicate dry fruit quality about these. And something which I often like to do with a spirit. Sounds a bit strange. Why I've not drunk it all that day, but I often like to pour some whiskey, any good spirit, and then come back to it the next day. So this glass here is different to the other glass I have here. And this glass here I actually poured yesterday as I was doing some tasting. And it's always a sign of a fantastic whiskey when you get a whole new host of flavors coming the next day. And now I've got really fine citrus, smoky burnt lemon oil. Maybe you sprayed it over a cocktail. Lovely balsam notes in there. Lovely spruce, pine, forest flavors. And this has been sitting no more than this in a glass for 24 hours. It's exuding all those flavors. This is an utterly sensational whiskey. It is magical. If you like smoky whiskies, you must have this new collection. If you're new to smoky whiskies, or if someone's given you a smoky whiskey that's a little bit too much in the past, come back in with Svensk Rök. It's got something for everybody. It truly has. It's an absolute sensation. Something you should also consider is that through our web shop at mackmyra.co.uk, if you buy a bottle of Svensk Rök, you can also receive a bottle of Svensk Ek for 30% off the price. That's 30% off the bottle of Svensk Ek when you buy a bottle of Svensk Rök.
Svensk Ek, we're doing that one next week, Alex, are we not?
We are, so please tune in Wednesday evening, 7 p.m. for our Svensk Ek tasting next week. Carl, for you, what are you detecting there?
Yeah, so something that comes through for me, and I thought this sort of the other week when I was trying it, was there's kind of like it ties in as well, I guess, when you talk about sort of dense smoke flavors and fruit sweetness as well. It's like a licorice. So that kind of sort of like, again, possibly the balsamic side of things, that sort of dense but sweet flavoring. I might actually try leaving mine out for a bit as well, because I've not tried that yet. And I do like it when it gets sort of in some aspects a little bit more intense. So a little bit of licorice. When you said raspberries, I was like, not really for me, but for some reason, the bonbons I get on the back, very on the back end. I can't explain kind of how I get that sort of that slight subtle dustiness, but it's definitely in there with a bit of that citrus tang. But yeah, in terms of when I'm drinking the smoky whiskey, and I don't want to be completely knocked off my feet, but I still want to taste smoke. I still want to taste sweetness. I think this is a great one to go to. I think it's interesting enough and characterful enough to stand up to any of the big boys in Scotch. It will give you a different dimension. It's something I think that is worth exploring, worth trying if you haven't before. And whether or not you're into smoke or you're not into smoke, I think it's got enough in there personally to please both camps.
Definitely. And if you do need more smoke in your life, there is the big brother, if you will. This is Svensk Rök Amerikansk Ek. So this has used more smoke and has matured exclusively in brand new American oak casks. That colour is natural. If we compare that with the colour of Svensk Ek, much more pale. Here, that really rich dark colour is all down to the use of brand new American oak casks. So to go alongside that really robust smokiness, we've got lots more tannin, structure, and sweetness. This is a fantastic whiskey. So, how to drink Svensk Rök? Well, just as it comes, of course. Drop of water, maybe for some. I don't detect the need. Guys, what do you think? Dilution with this one?
For me, no.
Sorry.
Sorry, Carl. Personally, for me, I only tend to add a drop of water if I feel that bit of alcohol burn, really. And I don't get that from that whatsoever. And I mean, that's what, 46.1%.
Yeah.
You know, I've had a lot stronger alcohols at 43%, or what I say, tasting more like an alcohol at 43%, which I've added water to. Whereas that at 46.1%, I don't think it, personally, I don't think it requires it, but each to their own glass, as it were.
I tend to agree. I think it delivers at 46.1. This whiskey is actually, if you've had Svensk Rök in the past, you should definitely give it a try. This latest batch from the last year or so is sensational. The average age on this has gone up. We're a relatively young company, so the ages of our whiskies are always progressing. Here, we've got an average age of about 12 years old. Now, it's important we don't use all very old whiskey in this because otherwise the phenols will disappear. We, of course, make sure we bring in plenty of younger, brighter, zingier, more intensely smoky whiskey to give it that balance. So, in the glass, probably no water. On the rocks, it's summertime. It will work really well. But we love playing around. We love experimenting. We love doing fun, exciting things at Mackmyra. You know that. So we're going to show you a couple of interesting ways to drink your Svensk Rök tonight. The first of those is a little something that we call the rock coffee. It is, it is a spritz. It is a summertime spritz. It's a summertime spritz with smoky whiskey. Did you think such a thing could ever be created? Well, it has been, and it's wonderful. About 35ml of Svensk Rök. About 50ml of cold brew coffee, a term that some might think is a little bit worrying, but it's very straightforward. Ground coffee, cold water, let it steep, strain it off. That's cold brew coffee. That's all you need to do. Cold brew coffee, tonic, and of course, I'm using the Creator Tonic. If you've not had the Creator Tonic, please get over to our website, get over to our web shop and get some of this for your Creator and your Lab Gin. It's sensational. It works really well in this. And just to finish it off, we've got some orange slices in there. Have you ever had espresso, guys? Have you ever had espresso and tonic?
Espresso and tonic?
Espresso by itself, granted, but espresso and tonic.
It was doing the rounds a few years ago in the cooler coffee shops, and it's a phenomenal combination. It really does work well, and we brought in some smoky whiskey to this, and we've got this little structure of the coffee flavors, the smoke mingling through, the tonic making it fresh, the zing of the citrus. This is something else. You can get all these recipes on our website. We've got another way of drinking Svensk Rök, which we're big fans of, and it's a little food pairing combination. Mickey, would you be so kind as to take us through this, please?
Of course. So the little Rök ritual, as it were, I like a wee nibble occasionally, probably more than occasionally in all fairness, while I'm having a dram or two, but I also like a nice coffee as well. Personally, I think coffee and whiskey can work really well together. And obviously, food's always good no matter what time of the day it is. But as a wee snack while having a dram, I like to take a wee espresso, a wee sip on the espresso. Because what the warmth does in your mouth is starts to open up your taste buds to different flavors as well, and the warmth through it. Think like when you get warm yourself, your pores open up so you can soak more things in. I think a good warm drink, especially a good coffee, will help do that. So a bit of the bitterness from the espresso. So the espresso gives you a bit of bitterness and warmth for your mouth, and then follow that up with a wee sip on your dram of the. And already, the sweetness from the dram and the bitterness from the coffee are combining quite well within my mouth, and you're starting to get different flavours coming from your whiskey. And obviously, we mentioned food as well. So a bit of sweet buttered brioche, slightly toasted. I like it for the feel, basically, and dipped in some sesame oil. Obviously, this is just Tesco's own, but other brands are available. And literally just a wee dip, like you'd see in a restaurant with like olive oil and all that sort of stuff in your breads, but sesame oil. Excuse me. The sweetness in the sesame oil, the nuttiness really complements the whiskey, and the slight bitterness of the coffee as well. It just opens up different flavour profiles while you're eating. Whiskey doesn't have to be that whiskey in a glass, sit in the corner of the pub. I might have a pie and a pint later on after it, stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? It can be part of an evening. Everybody has a wee evening stack every now and again, don't they? And there's no reason why it can't just be little bits and nibbles like that. Simple bit of bread, simple bit of oil. Yeah. A nice warming coffee. Maybe don't have your espresso too late at night.
Depends on what kind of night you're having.
Well, I suppose so. Sometimes it helps when you're getting a bit older. And then to pair that with your whiskey, honestly, it's just a lot of people tend to be a bit more scared of doing things like that. But at the end of the day, you're in your own house. Knock yourself out. Experiment. Have a wee try these things. Because you never know what you're going to like.
Definitely. I think with single malt whiskey, something with high fat content is always a good combination. With a richer, fruitier whiskey, a dark chocolate is often a way to go. We've used the sesame oil and those oils within the espresso to balance and to allow flavours to work through the mouth. And frequently blue cheese is often that works very well with smoky whiskey.
Very, very well.
Yeah.
That was to be a big pairing fan of mine.
Yeah, blue cheese coffee.
Was a really, really good heavily peated whiskey. And a nice wedge of blue cheese. Unfortunately, getting a bit older, the blue cheese is getting a bit harder to shift.
A bit more information than we needed then, Nicky, but we should all empathise.
Something a little bit lighter.
Like the brioche and the sesame oil.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to check on the questions. Mark, it's sensational. Grab that brioche, grab that sesame oil. We're going to check on a couple of questions. Cam, no, it wasn't, but it wasn't the finest version of the sesame oil, but any good sesame oil will do. David, water doesn't need it, does it? It's perfectly balanced here at 46 ABV. If you've got any questions, get them in fast. Just to recap, Svensk Rök is available on a special offer alongside its stablemate Svensk Ek. Buy Svensk Rök, have 30% off Svensk Ek. That's available in our web shop at mackmyra.co.uk right now. Svensk Rök is the peated expression in our core range. We floor malt our barley. We're one of 9 distilleries in the world to do that. We kiln it in a repurposed shipping container in a smoker that we charge with locally cut peat from about 40 miles southwest of our distillery, upon which we lay juniper twigs that come from the nearby forests, kindly donated to us. And those add this incredible flavour of juniper smoke, of pine smoke, of forest, of bonfire, of campfire. This is a phenomenally complex whiskey, yet at the same time, very, very approachable. We're all huge fans of Svensk Rök here at Mackmyra. We hope you are too. And we hope you join us for more tastings. We've got more happening this weekend. Please have a look at our YouTube page and our social media to stay updated on what else we've got going on. We will be examining Svensk Rök next week. This same motley crew will be taking through that particular whiskey. And for every week for the next few, you'll be experiencing either some more special seasonals or core range whiskies. And hopefully it'll be a lot of fun. May I please say thank you to Carl. Thank you very much, Carl.
Cheers, man. Thank you.
And Mickey. Thank you very much, Mickey.
Cheers, guys. Pleasant evening. Hope you all
Thank you very
enjoyed.
much, everybody. Have a lovely evening and skull.
Go.